Now, I did say, and I think you just heard it, I'm very happy to have interruptions. Rather than me talk for 10, or I might even talk for 20 minutes if you let me, it's much better to you to interrupt me with questions during the presentation. And rather than waiting for all our discussion at the end of the day, and maybe even you forget your question by the time I get to the end. But I will start now with the slides. We have a very long name, and I think one of the reasons for this is because we're neither a department, nor a discipline, nor a school. And I think that's partly because we have a joint delivery of our program with our organization, the Munster Technological University. And I think they have definitions for departments, disciplines, and so forth. And when it came to this joint program, we had to invent a new name. And so it's a Centre for Architectural Education. Most other places it would be called a School of Architecture or a Department of Architecture. But there isn't any other significance to this idea of the centre, although it gives us a bit of an aspiration that we are not only delivering degree programs, we are also contributing to a local debate, even national debate about what kind of built environment we want to live in. And so we do, as you'll see in some of the slides, we do invite people to come into our building and engage with us about what architecture is, what their street is like, what their buildings might become in the future. It's a very active form of learning in the Cork Centre for Architectural Education. I'm just trying to change slides. There we go. So I'm always very keen that if you are seriously interested in studying architecture, that you visit us. And this is because I think very many people come in with a serious misconception of what they're stepping into. And in fact, my own experience of setting into architecture when I was in school came from a professor who visited our school, and he uttered for me the magic words. He said, "Architecture is a combination of art and science." Well, the reason those words were magic for me is I'd spent the last 2 months searching through courses in different universities, and I was looking to do English literature plus physics, and I couldn't find a single university who would offer this joint degree. So the idea of architecture being a combination of art and science for me was a big attraction. Now, it's actually a very abstract way of thinking about architecture, and I don't think it's particularly a helpful way because it took me a long time to adjust myself to what architecture really was. At least the whole of my first year was spent wondering what I had let myself in for. So I'm keen that you would at least visit the school, notice that it's different. We do have lecture rooms in our school, but that's a minor part of our course. The major part of the course is learning by doing things, and that's done in several ways. We set students projects, and a project might last for a week, it might last for 6 weeks. But it's a whole series of issues, often to do with providing a building for certain users. It might be housing, it might be a theatre, it might be a community centre, it might be a school. So we have various different kinds of architectural briefs, and over the period of your education, we would want to introduce you to a very wide variety of buildings and user groups. So if you see these 3 categories I've highlighted, the notion there is that we really are about learning by doing. It's not a thing you're going to learn only by reading books. Many other subjects, it seems that you go through a series of lectures, you read a lot of books, and then you have an examination. We have very little formal examination. In fact, during COVID, we stopped doing formal examinations, and I don't think we're going to go back to it. So all of our students this year will be judged by the coursework they produce and that they present to us both during the year but also at the end of the year. In fact, right now, half of our students have submitted portfolios of work they've done during the past year, and the other half are busy preparing this week to submit all their work on Friday. So if you happen to visit our school tonight or tomorrow, it's a very unrepresentative because half the studios are empty and the other half you have students running around very nervously, going to photocopiers and printers and combining and cutting and pasting photographs and drawings. So it's not untypical activity, but it's an untypical feeling right now. Now, the idea in the middle here is that it's about creative practice. People often ask me, what's the difference between a building and architecture? Well, the answer to that is quite long, but one small part of that is that it is considered a creative practice. It's not about copying a previous solution. It's about understanding people's requirements, understanding what they want to do in a building, why they want a building at all, and discussing this with them, and then having creative solutions to the problems they're trying to solve, perhaps through making a building. Now, there is a technical side to all this because we have to create these big, heavy things called buildings. We have to understand about materials and about how materials join together, about how you keep out water and how you keep how you keep warm inside a building. So there's a certain amount of technical skills that we involve. And you can see from this illustration here, we've actually hooked up with the Cork Circus people who are training our students to understand the difference between tension and compression in forces, and how loads, in this case, the bodies of other students, these loads can be transferred down to the ground where you support them. So this is partly the idea of trying to feel structural forces inside your body rather than dealing with them only in the form of mathematical formula. So entirely through our program, we're dealing with theoretical knowledge, but we're trying to ground that knowledge through physical experience, either through observation or in this case, even through working with acrobats. Now, if I move on then, I just look a bit closer at each of these. So the first thing you might notice here is there's a group of people. And this is quite common. Is there someone trying to ask me a question? I keep hearing little blips on the microphones.
Kevin, that's more people joining throughout. So that's me leaving them into the session.
That's great. I am, remember, open for interruptions at any time. This is a group of first-year students, in fact, second-year students who were asked to go and study a local town. In this case, it was Kanturk. And as I said, the first thing you should notice is there's a whole group of people here working together. This is crucial in architecture. The idea of a lone genius devising a building is something of the past. Buildings nowadays come about through large numbers of people talking to each other, writing to each other, drawing for each other, and even modeling for each other. So one of our projects, at least every year, will be to do with working with a team of people to discuss where things should be located, why they should be located in certain parts of a town, how it interacts with the way people use the town and use the site, and what are the natural forces on that part of the town. So this is an example from that from some years ago. That's again the circus people in there. The lady with the red hat is from the circus school in Cork, and she is leading an exercise here to help understand the transfer of forces from one place to another. We're also very interested in materials. So in other words, technical studies are not all about dry formula. Formula are very useful to us. We use formulas, rules of thumb, to help know how big things should be. But we always, in the end, turn to engineers to tell us exactly how big should it be, or exactly how, or ask them the question, how small can I make something? So what we need with architects and designers is a feeling for how big things have to be and how different materials will respond differently, either structurally or through weathering when they're exposed to different conditions. So materials are a really important thing in architecture. And we've even invented a word, which you'll hear as soon as you walk into any architecture school, and they talk about materiality. Now, in the end, it's really a way of placing emphasis that we think materials and all their qualities, their psychological qualities, their structural properties, their endurance properties, all these different things are crucial and part of our selection process as to what we put into buildings. You'll sometimes find rather odd briefs, and it's very deliberate. In other words, we won't always give you run-of-the-mill traditional building problems to deal with. We'll sometimes give you unusual problems. And it's in order to make you face a problem from first principles, rather than say, well, if I had to design a house for a giraffe, then which zoo will I go to see how it's been done before? You might well do that, and we would encourage you to do that. But we especially want you to think from first principles. What does a giraffe need? And likewise, the clients you're working with don't have the same taste as you. They don't have the same cultural context as you. So you have to also treat people that you're working with in the same ways as you might treat giraffes, in the sense of you approach them with a sense of humility and a sense of questioning. What is it they really want? Because often your clients don't know what they really want in terms of a building. And it's up to you. One of your skills is to converse with them, to interact with them, maybe even to jointly design with them, to think about how can you get a clear, creative solution to the problems they're telling you about in their building requirements. Now, this involvement with individual clients also extends to society. We were very insistent that we wanted our architecture building to be in the town. So I've indicated already, we have two parents. We have Munster Technological University and we have UCC, and they both bring different things to our study. Munster Technological University has an art school. So we do have drawing class, a life drawing class, supplied by the art school, the Crawford School of Art and Design. We have in UCC a huge number of different departments that we draw upon, but maybe especially we draw upon geographers, we draw upon art historians, and we make use of this wide range of disciplines and expertise that are available in both institutions. But having mentioned the Art College in MTU, we are interested in what's happening in the world of art, because this is a way of encouraging us to explore ideas, visual ideas, spatial ideas, and physical ideas. We one time linked up with the sculpture department, but that's a kind of an extreme example of exploring the manipulation of matter. Architecture is not art. Architecture is about creating spaces for people in order to carry out the functions they require. So we are much more oriented towards meeting client needs than we are about producing a work of art. But the creative process underlying these are very similar. It's just that the architect has to constrain their process in order to ensure at every step they are meeting the requirements of their clients and society. Now, we started 16 years ago. There are now 6 schools of architecture in Ireland. So I'm always keen to make sure you know this. When I decided to study architecture, I went to my nearest course in Glasgow. I didn't realize there were about 30 alternative schools of architecture I could have gone to. Now in Ireland, you have 6 different schools and they're not all the same. So it's important. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I always encourage people to come and visit us, at least visit our building, but ideally visit when the students there to talk to. And I'm going to give you an invitation at the end of this talk, where you have a chance to talk to students and to see the kind of things that they have spent a year producing. You can see the whole of the work done by first year, the whole of the work done by second year, all the way up to our master's program. You'll see that work on display in a few weeks' time. And I'll end with an invitation to you to come to that exhibition opening. That previous slide is the kind of engagements we've had in different parts of the world. So we do exhibit our students' work to a local audience, but we also take it to other countries. So these international exhibitions that are mentioned there in Athens, in Venice, and Tallinn, and Istanbul, and Venice, these are exhibitions where we take student work to show it to the world outside. And often it's because we've had our final year students have been concentrating for a whole 12-month period on designing for those cities. So each year we choose a city, and that's where our master's students work on. And very often we get invited to go back and show the local residents or institutions the kind of ideas our students had. But it's also true in Cork itself. Typically, third year will work on the small towns around Cork City, and they will discuss with local people there about what kind of needs they have in that institution. We also work with the Cork County Architects Department, and they tell us about where they think a new school is required, or a new community centre, or a new library. And so we will work with the Cork County Architects to both identify the sites and to be introduced to local communities to discuss with them what kinds of buildings they need locally. So this happens both nationally, internationally, as well as locally in Cork County. Moving on. This is just a reminder that what you're discussing or thinking about right now is a 4-year program which leads to a Bachelor of Science honours degree in architecture. Now, for people who want to become a registered architect, to be legally recognized as an architect, and that's a protected term that you can't actually use in business without having the qualifications. To do that, you have to go through at least 7 years of activity. So if you decide to become an acting architect, a professional architect, you're looking at 7 years ahead. The degree you would do in Cork would be a 4-year bachelor's degree. And in Cork, we always then encourage you to go and work in the industry. Now, it might not be working with an architect, it might be working with a builder, it might be working with an engineer, it might be working with let's say, a sculptor factory. But we want you to do something outside the theoretical study of architecture and get experience before you come back to us, because when you come back to us, you're going to be given the option of doing a 12-month Master of Architecture degree. And we think that in order to walk out into society and call yourself a Master of Architecture, you must at least have some real world experience of seeing how things are created in the physical world. And beyond that, of course, we also have research degrees like doctoral degrees and so forth. But this is just a diagram to indicate where the degree you may be applying for fits into this. So your first 4 years are all 2 semesters with a long break during the summer. But if you come back to do a master's, then it's a 3-semester continuous 12-month period with maybe just 2 or 3 weeks in between at Christmas and summertime. So that would be the road ahead. Here are some of the people involved, and maybe I draw special attention to Valerie Mulvin. Valerie Mulvin acted as our external advisor, and she was one of the people who come and look at all the students' work in order to make sure that the standard is at least equal to other schools in Ireland. But we always have brought in external examiners from overseas to make sure it's equivalent or better than international standards of architecture. So Valerie is very interesting because whilst she was our external examiner, she was also the architect UCC had appointed to design the Marai Centre. That's the Marine and Renewable Energy Centre just outside Cork. And so in other words, she has, at the time of examining and working with our, evaluating our students, she was also creating a very interesting and unusual building. And this is typical of what I said, we try and give students unusual projects because they stretch your abilities. Valerie was given a very unusual project, a building which had 3 giant pools in it, because one of the research activities is to test things like windmills that are going to be mounted out in the ocean. And so you have huge big wave tanks where you can test, if necessary, to destruction, new proposals. So a very unusual building there with 3 giant wave tanks on the ground floor. Moving on. By the way, we have 8 academic staff plus 2 other people. One is an administrator and one is a technical workshop coordinator. They're employed by either UCC or by Munster Technological University. But we don't carry the whole load of teaching. There's another 30 people who are practicing engineers, practicing architects, and practicing artists who come in and support the different modules within our programs. So this is the tip of the iceberg, if you like, on the people you'll be in contact with if you join Cork Centre for Architectural Education. Now, the invitation I'm going to give to you is to come to the opening party of the exhibition, the students' exhibition for 2022. And the exhibition is held in our own building, so that I have a joint reason for bringing you in. I want you to see the environment you would work in if you join the architecture school. I also want you to see the work the students do. And most important of all, I want you to meet some of those students, because they're the ones who can give you a realistic idea of what being a student of architecture in Cork is like. So if you come to our building, it's off campus. It's neither on the NTU campus nor the UCC campus. It's about 5 minutes walk from the English market. It's beside, if some of you are from Cork, you might know the Nano Nagel Centre, which has been recently renovated. In fact, it was renovated by a team of architects who also designed our own building. And we were lucky in that case because that team of architects included two people who teach in our school, but also it included 3 of our graduates. So our recent graduates were involved in the design of our new building. The new building opened 3 years ago. Now it's very different on the outside, and this might be interesting to you, that the process of design was that they had applied for planning permission to create a building here before they had decided who the clients for the building would be. So in a sense, there's a huge contrast between the outside of this building and the inside of the building, as you'll see in the next picture. So this is the inside, and this was designed in a lot of collaboration with, especially with the staff. It was done under a great hurry because there was a builder on the site already refurbishing the Nano Nagel Centre. They wanted to give him a new contract before he withdrew all his tools and labor from the site. And so this was under great pressure. They would send us a drawing maybe at midday, and they'd expect us to come back with feedback by 9 o'clock the next morning. So it limited the number of people who could be involved in the interaction, but there was a huge amount of changes made through feedback from the staff. And one of the key organizing ideas here was not to do with the appearance. It was to do with the idea that we wanted people to be able to walk up through our building and to see what was happening. And not only that, we wanted our first year students to feel free to wander into the second year studio, or maybe even to walk into the 5th year studio, where you see a huge jump in the skill level. Now, typically it's quite difficult to walk into a different year that you're not involved with, especially that final step of pushing open the door to see what's behind it. So in this case, we took away all the doors. We have a very open plan building. You can see on the bottom right-hand side, a studio. Now, this is a bit misleading. I have never seen the studio so neat and tidy as that photograph shows it. And that's because if you're making things, you need material. You need heaps of papers and materials, and you're making things, you have tools, you have cutting instruments, you have drawing instruments. So this was obviously taken during the summer, just after the cleaners had been through the studios and cleaned out. But the important thing on that bottom right picture is that is a studio. And that gives you, it's actually the second year studio, but you can see that every red chair is a space that's dedicated to one student. You're given that space for the 2 academic semesters. And you're expected to be there because you learn, I almost said you learn as much, but that might be, I was going to say you learn as much from your fellow students who are sitting beside you as you do from the staff. Now, that was my experience in School of Architecture. Maybe it's not true in the Cork Centre for Architectural Education, but the important thing is you're with them for hours and hours and hours every day. And you're seeing a member of staff maybe twice a week. So they'll be visiting you and looking at and you'll be showing them your design developments, and they'll be commenting on it and giving you advice as to how to make it better. But all day long, you're in that space, the studio space, with other students thinking about the same problems. And so you learn a huge amount by talking with those students. So you can see there on the left-hand side, there's a big central staircase. There's a big open space when you go in our front door, and that's because we like to have exhibitions. We bring in architects like Valerie Mulvin to show the work that she's doing. She just recently finished a whole university campus in India. So we invited her to exhibit that work in the studio and then come and give us a talk during one evening. But you can see a glimpse there at the bottom of the staircase. There's the exhibition of models that we've held onto. But as you move up the stairs, you move towards the architectural studios. And on the first floor, you will find the first year studio, the second year studio, and the third year studio. And up another flight of stairs, and you'll come into the fourth year and the master's studio, the fifth year studio. So we want people to see what's happening in the school. We want to learn from each other. And it really is, I think, a profession where you learn from everybody. Now, again, these are some of the spaces in the building. I talked about engaging with the public, because eventually the public are people you're going to be designing buildings for. So our building looks out on Old Cork. We didn't want to be out in the suburbs. We didn't want to be way out where the MTU campus is, or even the UCC campus, which is it's only a 15 minutes walk from the town centre, but it's still detached, let's say, from where many people are doing commerce, working, or living. So we want to be visually connected to the city. We want to be walking through the city streets as we walk to work or as we go out for lunch. Inside the building, you can see on the top there, that's a student standing at the lectern, and she's talking through her designs, which she is displaying on the large screen. Now, this is important. This is what you do on frequent basis. So I talked before about we issue you with projects. When you finish a project, you don't just put it in your drawer, you present it to other people. And the reason we start off quite quietly you present to a few other students, perhaps the group of students you're working with. Then you might present to tutors, but eventually we invite in other people to listen to you. And we'll invite in perhaps perhaps County Cork architects who have been thinking about the same building you've designed, and they'll give you more expert advice. Perhaps we'll bring in potential clients like librarians if you've been designing a library. In the bottom left-hand side, you can see there the man with the golden chain is the Cork City Mayor. And the man over near the window is the Cork City Architect. So again, we try to interact with local employers and people responsible for the local environment. And we bring them in to look at the students' work. So the mayor sat there for over 2 hours watching the ideas or looking at the ideas that our fourth year students were producing for redeveloping the centre of Cork. And again, that's a kind of target we want you to have in mind. This is what you'll do in real life when you work as an architect. So we want you to have that experience and the confidence to stand up in front of an audience and explain your ideas. And it's difficult in the beginning, but eventually it becomes a normal everyday part of your existence as a student of architecture and eventually as a practicing architect. Now, again, I've said a lot of what we are doing is talking to clients and potential clients and authorities about what they allow and what they won't allow, but we are also making things. And we're making things partly to show our clients, partly to stimulate our clients' imagination, but also to help ourselves visualize what we're going to create and to think and develop it in more detail. I've also added in the bottom right-hand side, which I took this during the first semester, and this was the desk of one of our Masters of Architecture students. Because normally what we show you is desks with drawing boards on it or desks with computers where they're doing computer-aided design. But this was our master students during the first semester. And I like this picture because in the first semester of our master's program, we kind of go back to the ideas we have in first year. which is to mix up your ideas, to reconceptualize what architecture, even what a building can be. Because typically we grow up in a house, we spend 20 years in that house, and we might spend a large part of that in going to a school. And those two buildings dominate our lives, and they dominate our ideas of what buildings are or what they can be. So one of the first things you have to do in first year is reconceptualize. Think again about what a building can be. And again, when we start the master's program, we also go back to basic principles. So on that master's students table, you can see all kinds of things, but you don't see a drawing board, you don't see a CAD program. I can see devices. I think I can see a camera in that yellow box. I can see scissors. I can see cutting devices for cutting up cardboard. I can see pens. I can see books. And we spend a lot of time looking at literature when we go into the master's program. We were looking for inspiration from all different sources. We're seeing some odd optical device there that they're doing to look at the town differently, and notes and various different bits and pieces. What I'm introducing you to is a course which has skill at its basis, communication with users of buildings at its basis, and an open attitude towards creativity. And it's an experience which I can neither explain it to you in words, just in the same way that I couldn't even conceptualize it myself before I started it. So that makes the final slide very important, because the final slide is an invitation for you to come and visit us. On the 2nd of June, that's the first Thursday in June, in the evening, we have a public opening of our exhibition of all the students' work. So this is not just a selection of the best of the students' work. This is everything our students produce in a year, all the students. So we do that. We open, this is a day in which we have the external examiner coming to visit us. So at the end of the examination, at 5:30, we publicly open the exhibition, and you can see everything that the students produced. The first year students will have all their work in one place, the second year all in another place. So you can walk through the school, going from studio to studio, looking at the progress in the skills that the students have as they go through from first year up to fourth year. And you can see an intermediate exhibition from the master's program. The master's takes 3 semesters, so they're not actually finished their projects, but you can have a snapshot of where they're at after 2 semesters. So do come to that. It's open from 5:30 to 8 o'clock, or even 8:30. So even if you're working and you need to travel to get in to see it, we'll be open. You'll have a chance to see it right up till 8:30. If you want to come and talk to people, of course, then it's much better to come early in the afternoon or early in the evening. Good. Now, again, that's part of the reason why I showed you the photographs of our front door. So as you walk up Douglas, it's Douglas Street, not Douglas Road. Mistake. Okay, let me just flip back. I think we have the address further back. There we are, Douglas Street. It's a street with a hill, and we're at the top of the hill. And if you're from Cork City, you might well know Nano Nagle Place, which is the old school started by the famous Nano Nagle, who started female education in Ireland. So I will stop talking now, and I will create a silent space in which you can enter with any questions, or if Ruth has got any from the chat that she wants to draw my attention to.